Hey everybody, it's Lindsay, and I am back with my second video going through the wonderful story of the reason why I became an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So this next story was a bit of a traumatic event. It wasn't really one of the largest reasons I left the religion, but it is something that happened to me and has had somewhat of a significant effect on me later in my life. So I will just jump into the next story, which is that I'm going to skip a couple of years here between the ages of 10 and 13. At 13, I think they hadn't really settled down a bit. I was still very suspicious of men in the Kingdom Hall. You would say I was on kind of a high alert. I'm still very much on a high alert in regards to people. But this had occurred over the span of a year, and it involved not a Jehovah's Witness, but a Jehovah's Witness Bible study. His name was Barry, and he happened to be a schizophrenic. And as you know, it's a general Jehovah's Witness belief that people can control their mental illness. So, Barry deserved a chance to get to know God. I happen to disagree with that, but anyways, Barry showed up to the Kingdom Hall. I could not really do anything about it. But Barry seemed harmless, and to be honest, we had another schizophrenic in our Kingdom Hall who, although weird, was harmless. I don't believe that Barry was harmless. He, at some point, started to stalk the sisters in the Kingdom Hall. So it wasn't just me. He creeped out other sisters in the Kingdom Hall. But I think that you could probably appreciate from my first video why this was really hard for me. And I think, honestly, after having done the first video, I have a less emotional attachment to this story, so it kind of loosened up the feeling behind this for me. Being stalked by a schizophrenic in the Kingdom Hall reminded me of, being left with a pedophile. Anyway, so what did Barry do? Well, firstly, I didn't have to put up with him at every meeting, which is a blessing. I only had to deal with Barry on Sundays. And how the behavior start. I couldn't figure out. I actually only figured it out by telling another sister about it. In the middle of the meeting, I had gone to the bathroom. I was leaving the women's bathroom, and I couldn't open the door. So my hand was on the knob. I was turning it. It wasn't budging. I would pull the door, nothing. It wouldn't open. And so then I did that for a little while. I just almost started to panic because I was trapped. And there was no one else, no other woman in the bathroom, and I didn't know what was happening or why the door wasn't working. And then I tried the door again, and it opened. And I happened to ask my friend Lori. I just mentioned it to her. And she's like, oh, that's Barry. Barry follows sisters to the bathroom, and then he locks them in there. So by this point, I was leery of Barry, but I also knew of Barry prior to the bathroom incident. He worked with my father, so I knew that he couldn't hold down a job. I knew he was also heavily medicated, and I think certifiably crazy. Like, his schizophrenia was not in any sort of control. It wasn't in control via medication. He was hearing voices talk to him. And the reason he was fired from the workplace is because he threatened to stab somebody with a knife. And this man is welcomed to the Kingdom Hall every Sunday. Barry and I started this very weird cat and mouse game. It was a bit odd. He would try to trap me at the Kingdom Hall. He would try to catch me unawares or trap me kind of in between rows of chairs. I don't really know what his intention was. I didn't really care to find out. To be honest with you, I was 13, and I would say, a bit fragile, especially around men at the Kingdom Hall after the prior video, the prior event with pedophile. So I talked to my father about it, and he laughed. He seemed to think that, Barry wasn't a big deal. He was not going to hurt anybody. It was innocent enough. But he scared me. It scared me that he constantly wanted to keep me tied down to one place. And so I devised a plan. And my plan was to get the keys for my parents' car and go directly from my seat at Kingdom Hall to the car in the parking lot. And I was terrified. I was that terrified that I would run from my seat to the car. And it wasn't really enough that, this is Otis. It wasn't really enough that I could just sit in the car with the car locked. I had to get into the car and lay down face first onto the floorboards. And then I had to deal with some very intense feelings of panic until it was time to go home. And this happened for a year. And eventually, I suppose one day, Barry got one up on me. I wasn't in the car. I had to go downstairs or something. And he did, in fact, corner me. And he told me he didn't like what the voices in my head were saying to him, which is scary. And I grabbed the arm of a brother who I didn't know and didn't talk to because I was pretty quiet at this point. And this brother watched the interchange happen. I don't know what else Barry said, but he was scary. And, something great happened. Although it took a year for me to be relieved of Barry, eventually somebody, I think it was actually this brother, saw him as a threat. And he was asked to not ever come back to the Kingdom Hall. So I guess, eventually that was good. But unfortunately, I had to go through the experience. And that very experience 2 years later would be played out one day in my normal non-Jehovah's Witness life. One day, someone said something to me, not in regards to anything Jehovah's Witness related. They just said schizophrenic. And I had my very first flashback. And I'll try to describe it for you, because if you've never really had one, it is quite a unique experience. All of a sudden, it's like I was transported back into time. Like my body was still the same and I was in a different environment, but it was like I was back at the Kingdom Hall at the age of 13 with all the same feelings, with all the same fear, with the same panic and terror. And I will say that this one occasion was scary enough for me 2 years ago. It took me to therapy for the first time. Although I attempted therapy before, but I could never talk about the damage of being a Jehovah's Witness. So anyways, this flashback, I suppose, ended up being a good thing. But I did have to spend an entire week. I spent an entire week in this flashback. I'm not really proud to admit this, but I was so scared that I carried around a hammer. I slept every night with a hammer under my pillow. I did not leave my apartment except to go to work. And I would not allow myself to be, I could not be outside. So I had to run from my car to wherever it is I was going. So my life for a week was sleeping with a hammer under my pillow and going to work like in a very kind of like terrified, limited basis, running from my apartment to my car and then from my car to my apartment. And it was very limited. It was shut down. And then that's when I realized that I had to confront my Jehovah's Witness issues or my ex-Jehovah's Witness issues. And while I was thinking about this, I was also thinking about all the mental illness that surrounded me at my time at the Kingdom Hall. I was in one congregation for the most part, all my 23 years I was in. And then I was in a congregation for a few months after that. And to be honest, I didn't get to know any of those people. So the people I was exposed to growing up, besides the schizophrenics, I realized that, wow, there are a lot of depressed people. And in fact, I think the majority of my family, my aunts, my uncles, my mother, my father, me, suffered with depression. I would say probably quite a few people in the congregation also suffered with depression. I knew that some people were medicated. I think I was medicated at 19. I started antidepressants like ridiculously early. I mean, not that you should ever start them, but it was very early in life that I got introduced to antidepressants, and as did another family member of mine. And then I think, oh, okay, well, you can also add to that OCD. I think that this religion encourages mental illness. And I think it demonstrates itself in different ways for different people. Some people, it's depression. For my father, it was obsessive compulsive disorder. He would have to check everything. Everything would have to be unplugged when we left our house. And my brother and I got so used to this that it became our habit to also be obsessed with things like this, like things being plugged in. It took me a couple of years to get over mine. He took a little bit longer. He's much better than he used to be. But wow, I mean, that's also a side effect. And once you get past the OCD and the depression and, the certifiable schizophrenics, of course, there's other mental illness there. People I grew up with have addiction to painkillers. They're still Jehovah's Witnesses. They cannot cope with the system that they're trapped in. And then you have the alcoholics, which nobody talks about or acknowledges. But I would say that there are a number of Jehovah's Witnesses who drink. Like a lot. I knew a lot of alcoholics. Highly functioning alcoholics, maybe. But there are a lot of alcoholics at my Kingdom Hall. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that the Kingdom Hall is not a healthy atmosphere at all. It isn't what Jehovah's Witnesses claim it to be. There is no strive for perfection because it's not possible. It's not achievable. Jehovah's Witnesses may say, oh, we're not trying to be perfect. we're just putting on a new personality so we can be acceptable to God. But they just deny the problems that make them human. And it's concentrated and widespread because it's such a closed system. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and one of the things that did push me out of this organization, and I'll probably do a longer video on it because I think it deserves some more time, was the instances of suicide. It was the people I knew who took themselves out. It was the people I loved who wanted to kill themselves. It was at 14, sitting down in front of my kitchen sink and finding a bottle, trying to find a bottle so I could kill myself. 14. I was trying to find my way out of this miserable existence. And that wouldn't be the only time that I was confronted with my own thoughts of suicide. I want to say to my haters, because I have some, I consider my YouTube page to be like my home. It's mine. So if you're going to call me a liar, I'm going to delete your posts. However, I may start keeping them up because, sister, and I think I know you know who you are, all your comments do is prove what a loveless, insincere, mean-spirited organization that you're part of. And to that sister, I say, as you're reading your silver sword at the Kingdom Hall, keep one eye in the scripture and one eye on the brother beside you. Because the truth is you're nipple deep in sexual deviance and mental illness. To my supporters, it's difficult to share this. So thank you for your support. I appreciate it. I hope it helps the others of us that have been, there's trauma here. Those of us who have been traumatized. Those of us who, we spent a lot of years trying to just sort out the lies. And to those of us who blame ourselves for being born into this disgusting organization that paints itself to be something healthy and spiritual and the messenger of God. To you, I say, you had no choice. You were trapped. Getting your mind around the lies is hard. Dealing with trauma is hard. But you no longer have to define yourself by them. Your worth is no longer dependent on their opinion. I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I hope in the meanwhile, until my next video, that you keep well. Thank you.